Hi there, good evening everyone. Welcome into the realm of eternal damnation. Tonight we are going to celebrate Halloween, or Samhain, whichever you prefer to call it. Whatever, I hope when the ghosties and ghoulies come a-calling, you'll be ready. And you will be ready to drink and to dine and to pay reverence to the ancestors. As you can see, some of my ancestors are here. The old family, and here are the death masks of other members of the family. So we're all here, along with my friend. So, we shall raise a toast to everyone out there, and I hope that you have a wonderful Halloween. So tonight, in this particular video, I want to read you a story from my latest book, which is called Ordo Strigoi V. It's a vampire journal, and it's all about vampires. The story that I would like to read to you tonight, I actually wrote in Whitby, the place where Bram Stoker chose to write the Dracula book, which has spawned so many films, so many television series and so many books. And here's my attempt. This story is called Nathaniel. It was the year 1899. The date was the 29th of October. I was 28 years old. And my name is George Edward Green, and this is my story. I found myself in the old fishing port of Whitby, which is situated on the northeastern coast of England. I had come from my native West Yorkshire home in Huddersfield to start out on a new adventure in life in a new town, and I could not think of anywhere else better to be. I had come in search of Whitby Jet, which had become part of the mourning attire for Queen Victoria after the sudden death of her husband Prince Albert in 1861. There was money to be made from Whitby Jet, and also from the many fossils that were to be found along the coast between Whitby and Ravenscar. There was one particular night which was very dark and stormy. The wind was blowing at gale force as it came across the North Sea. There were ships within the harbour walls that were being tossed and blown like pieces of cork. However, they did have much more protection than those who were out at sea, having to battle through mountainous waves which came ashore, crashing and thundering into the harbour between the two twin piers. Both lighthouses shone their message of warning to the ships of their impending doom on the rocks as they were tossed and blown towards the shore. The wind was driving fiercely over the harbour walls and was causing the sand to move in a most unusual way. It was creating a kind of serpentine pattern, undulating and arching as it moved across the beach. I was staying in an old fisherman's cottage on Henrietta Street, which was known locally as Pier Cottage. The cottage always looked as though it was shrouded in an eerie smoke. This came from Fortune's Kipper smoking house, and it must have had since William Fortune started the smokehouse in 1872. Sometimes that smoke gathers around the old street light, has the appearance of some ethereal spirit dancing in the night air. There was a window in the cottage which led out onto a balcony overlooking Tate Hill Sands. The sands where in Bram Stoker's book Dracula the ship Demeter had run aground during a violent storm, not unlike the storm I was experiencing that night. Waves were crashing. They were thunderous as they banged into the breakwater, and great plumes of spray were sent high into the night air. The wind was howling, making a very eerie sound, and it seemed to have a ghostly sound as it passed through the red-pantiled rooftops. Although I felt very comfortable in my cottage, I had a strange feeling of uneasiness because of the violence of the storm outside. I lit some candles and threw some driftwood logs onto the fire. These began to spit and crackle as the flames took hold of them, bringing a warm but eerie glow into the cottage, as though flames were dancing across the walls. The icy wind which blew in from the North Sea brought hail, which tapped against the window pane, an insistent tap, tap, tap. Lightning flashed across the bay, and it appeared to be quenched in the seething cauldron which was the sea. I sat down in front of the fire which was roaring away in the grate, and observed that the flames were reflected in the polished brass of the fender, which was around the hearth. I took some old twist tobacco from my pouch, cut a length of it off with my pocket knife, which oddly enough had a whalebone handle, no doubt a relic from the days when the whaling fleet used to set out from Whitby to harpoon these giant creatures of the deep, returning with their catch, which was used for a variety of things. I placed the tobacco between the palms of my hand and gently rubbed it before packing it into my clay pipe. I put a taper into the flames, and as it lit I put it to my pipe and began to draw on it until the tobacco was alight. I blew the smoke towards the ceiling, and I have to say with some satisfaction. As I listened to the howling of the wind and the constant tapping of the hail on the window pane, I felt very much at peace with my surroundings. I poured myself a large glass of whisky from an old decanter and sipped at it, savouring every drop. I felt a total and complete calm fall over me. This in the midst of such a violent storm outside my window. I gazed into the fire and I began to drift away, while the wind continued to howl and the hail continued to tap on my window pane. My mind began to think about all those poor souls who were out on the sea that night. I must have drifted off to sleep, because I awoke to what sounded a more insistent tapping at the window pane. I stared through my sleep-dulled eyes, and I could see what appeared to be a man on the balcony tapping at the glass. My eyes regained their focus, and I could see that he was a very tall man, very gaunt in appearance and dressed from head to foot in black, with a cloak which had its collar up against the wind. Looking down to his feet, he had a pair of black shoes on, which looked as though they had mud on them. I observed his hands, which were very slender, with long pointed fingernails. He had sunken cheeks, which were made more noticeable because of his high cheekbones. His eyes were as black as Whitby jet. They appeared lifeless. Even on the occasion that the moonlight caught them from behind the passing clouds, there was no sparkle, just cold, dead eyes. His hair, which was shoulder length and straight, was jet black in colour again, shining in the moonlight. The blackness of his hair framed a very pale complexion. He stood there, one hand tapping at the window, with the other hand hung by his side. He carried on tapping at the window pane and stared at me with those dark eyes. Occasionally, it was unnerving. I knew not what to do. I didn't know what he was seeing, as he appeared to be looking me up and down from the top of my head to my feet. He also looked into all the corners of the room, tap, 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 on the window pane. Then in a single movement he appeared to gesture me to come towards the window. I was unable to avert my eyes, and felt compelled to look into those eyes which seemed to be looking directly into my soul. I was transfixed, and I could do nothing but obey his will, and I walked towards that window. I tried once again to avert my eyes, but he seemed to have me hypnotised. He reached out his arm and held up his hand. His finger beckoned me to open the window. And I noticed that though the wind howled around him, he remained motionless. Not even a single hair on his head was moving. My hand stretched out towards the catch on the window. I was powerless to do any other than what he willed. I opened the catch, slowly opened the window, and felt obliged to tell him, "Please, enter the room." He stepped through into the room, and he seemed to glide over towards the fire. He stood by the mantelpiece. Then he sat opposite me in a fireside chair, and he stared at me with those dark but strangely dead eyes. He said, "My name is Nathaniel, and I have been in Whitby for what seems centuries. And I often wander the cold streets at night looking for people such as you, people who are willing to invite me into their home." He spoke again. "It is such a foul evening out there, and it is so kind of you to let me share the warmth of your fire, and to give me some company. I would like to offer to you the chance to join me on the journey of an eternity." He walked around the room. Well, when I say walked, he appeared to glide. Wherever he went, he glided. "This journey will give you everything, but will also cost you everything you have. So tell me, would you care to come with me?" I was not sure, and I wanted to know more of what this journey was. I asked Nathaniel to tell me more, and offer me a drink of my fine malt whisky. Nathaniel said, "Thank you so much, but I never drink wine or spirits." I offered him something to eat to warm him up, but Nathaniel told me he had already eaten. The room bathed in candlelight, and the glow from the fire was very, very cosy, and we chatted about this journey that he had spoken of. Nathaniel told me of his travels around the world in times past, of his visits to the opera houses of Milan, the ballet theatres of Paris, the playhouses of London. All this before he decided to live in the quaint old seaport of Whitby. His story was fascinating, and one which certainly caught my imagination. This man had seen more and done more than most people can ever dream about. I sighed and said, yes, I will join you on this journey, because you have excited my mind and you could open up the world for me. Then, as if from nowhere, he was stood directly in front of me, with those dark but dead eyes looking directly at me. He towered above. I looked upon his face, which was deathly pale. His thin lips parted to reveal what looked like fangs, protruding from his upper jaw. His face was emotionless, and I was powerless and could only stare into those jet black eyes. He reached forward and placed a hand upon my shoulder, while the other remained at his side. The hand on my shoulder had a touch so gentle that I scarce could feel it there at all. My heart began to race at this sight before me, so scary, but yet so compelling in the candlelight. I had never met anyone like him before. Then he stooped, and I could smell the aroma of the grave upon his skin. He sniffed at my flesh and breathed in deeply before moving closer to me. Suddenly his cheek was touching my cheek. He was as cold as marble, like one who was dead. He then moved towards my neck, and it was then I felt those fangs sink deep into my vein, followed by the sound of him drinking my life's blood. I could hear him sigh with deep satisfaction. The last thing I remember is drifting into blackness. I awoke the very next evening, after the sun had gone down. The night was calm, and the violent storm of the previous day had passed inland and out across the North Yorkshire moors. I looked out across the bay, through the twin piers, through the lighthouses, which were flashing out their warning to the ships, warning of the dangerous rocks awaiting them, should they stray too close to the shore. It was just like any other evening, with the exception that I had woken with an incredible thirst for human blood. I wanted to go out onto the cobbled roads of the town and into the dark alleyways of Whitby with their hiding places. And as I walked down Argument's Yard, I found my first victim. He was on his way home after spending a few hours at the White Horse and Griffin Inn. I quickly dispatched him into the jaws of death. Nathaniel had gone somewhere into the night after starting me on this eternal journey. He left behind a vampire. Nosferatu, fear me. So that's the story from my book, folks. The book, which is available for sale on Amazon.co.uk. Also available in the O'Keldra Centre in Anglesey in North Wales, and it is also available in Artisan Crafts in Amlock in North Wales. I hope you've all enjoyed that little story, and I hope it's given you some insight into what else you may find within this book. There are, I've forgotten how many, there's at least 70 poems and 12 short stories. And on that note, I will raise the glass once again to Nathaniel and thank him for the journey that he sent me on. Reverence to the Strigoi V and reverence to the Strigoi Mort. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening to me. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a thumbs up, click the like button, feel free to leave a comment, and I'd be really grateful if you would consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon so you can get any further uploads which are going to be on here, and there are going to be a lot. And it's not all about this stuff, it's a very eclectic channel, as you will see if you take a look. And I would like to say thank you once again, namaste, and happy Halloween.